Hey, Soraya.
Hey, Jeff.
So I don't know about you, but I am still on a high from that monkey show that we saw last weekend. So your first show post-pandemic or I don't know. So whatever we
Felt good.
whatever
It
we
felt
are
good.
in now.
It felt great being out and seeing live music.
With
There's
friends.
nothing that can ever match it, ever.
Yes, exactly.
And it was a great show. It was a great show, good company, fantastic music, and a really special night.
Absolutely. That was fantastic. It was good to be able to hang out with friends again and enjoy such a fabulous performance. But I'm still on a high from that.
Oh my gosh, me too.
But for today's
I won't
episode,
go on.
Today's episode is not a monkeys panel review, although we should.
No, although it would be a great idea, but no. I think our guest today, our guest today, we've had him on before, but Jeff and I are really excited about talking to him and talking about his latest release. So Pat, Jeff, do you want to let everyone know who's on the show?
Yes, and you almost spilled the beans.
Spoiler.
But we're going to be talking, this is a flyer for the release that we're going to be talking about. So we're talking to Pat Thomas, who we've had on the show before, talking about Barbara Manning, talking about Steve Wynn, talking about all kinds of stuff, just Paisley Underground in general. So we know Pat is just a master of all trades, but we haven't really focused on his music as much as I think we should. Music that he's created. So his band Mushroom has this 2021 release, Songs of Dissent, which is a live recording from the Makeout Room in San Francisco Bay Area that they recorded on August 9th, 2019. And we wanted to bring Pat on to talk about this release because for me, this CD is one of my top favorites of the year, definitely my top 10. So we wanted to bring Pat on. So we have him coming up in a bit, and we were talking a little bit about this CD release and how this band came together and what this band is.
Sounds good. Let's get started.
Let's do it.
Hi, this is Soraya.
And this is Jeff.
Our podcast is called Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme,
a podcast where the two of us play music that we like and share anecdotes and background about the tunes.
We hope you'll join our conversation. And without further ado, a grooviar.
Let's get groovy.
So, guys, what is this, episode number 787, or what are we up to by now?
Pretty close, 153.
150, got it.
We're up to 150.
It feels like there's been at least 300 of them. This one's a little.
I think that's Pat's way of saying you guys need to keep it shorter. Some of these go too long.
Yeah. So, did everybody do their homework? Speaking of classes,
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We listened. We enjoyed.
Well, Jeff has the advantage. He's actually seen Mushroom live at least once, maybe twice, right?
He's got me beat.
Yeah, a few times at Cafe Nella, and I wanted to mention that, Pat, and thanks for joining us to discuss the new Mushroom CD that I have right here, Songs of Dissent, which is a live recording from the Makeout Room live performance that you guys did on August 9th, 2019. First release from the band in over a decade. And like you mentioned, Pat, I was fortunate enough to see the band a couple times at Cafe Nella in Los Angeles. And for those who haven't had a chance to see Mushroom, I don't know if there'll be more opportunities, but if you do get the opportunity, please go see this band. They're incredible. And according to your little hype sticker, Pat, the band is described as a psychedelic jazz rock improv. So that's what you get when you go to see Pat. For the most part, the songs are being created at the moment you're seeing them. So very good. Well, thank you for joining us, Pat, to discuss this CD. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, this CD, besides being the first CD in a long time, is the first CD to feature two new members that you've known for a long time, Victor Krummenacher and David Immergluck from Monks of Doom and Camper Van Beethoven, etc. So basically, Mushroom has always sort of been based in San Francisco. And then when I moved to LA a few years ago, I started, initially we were just calling it Mushroom LA to sort of differentiate it from the other mushroom, but it's all just sort of become one big happy family. But yeah, Victor Krumenacher and David Immergluck have become kind of key members at this point. So we recorded that album, and it probably would have come out a year or so ago, except, you know, obviously due to COVID, we didn't want to try to put out a CD in the middle of COVID. So we kind of waited for it to curtail. But the cool thing about Mushroom is it's, you know, it is kind of a free form thing. There's a few core members, me, of course, Ned Doherty on bass, but, you know, being here in LA, for example, DJ Bonebreak from X has played vibraphone a few times. We don't usually have vocals, but Sid Straw jumped on stage and did some wild vocal improv, et cetera, et cetera.
So Pat, one of the things you start out in the introduction piece, Founding Father, saying 22 years ago, Makeout Room gave Mushroom their first show. So take us back 22 years. How does Mushroom get its start, or where did the idea come from?
Okay, well, as your listeners will remember from previous episodes, I was in a band in the 80s called Absolute Gray, where I was the drummer. And then in the 90s, mid 90s, I switched over to being a singer-songwriter. I put out a couple of albums in Germany with kind of a Lou Reed, Dylan vibe. I think we discussed those briefly once in another episode. And so what happened was, in the early to mid 90s in Germany, and I was also living there, people like Chris Kakavas, Steve Wynn, Barbara Manning, Penelope Houston, myself to a lesser degree, like everybody loved like acoustic-y folk rock guitar stuff, right? In Germany, it was very popular. And all of those bands, including myself, toured a lot there. And then one day the Germans were like, I've had enough of this shit, right? And so I kind of was getting sick of it myself. So I decided to go back to drumming. And by this point, I was really into, not to make it all about Germany, but I was into bands like Can and Faust, krautrock bands. I also loved Soft Machine and King Crimson, Miles Davis when he went electric. So I wanted to start kind of a psychedelic jazz thing. And I actually, this is actually kind of funny. The first like 5 Mushroom albums, I use a fake name. I'm not Pat Thomas. I'm actually Patrick O'Hearn. And that's because in Germany, I was so well known for being sort of the grandfather of this scene of acoustic-y type music, that I didn't want anyone to think Mushroom was more of the same, right? So Mushroom actually Mushroom got so popular in Germany that we wound up putting out 4 albums and toured there. But the early reviews, I love them because it doesn't say Pat Thomas, the guy who brought you Chris Kakavas. It says some guy named Patrick O'Hearn is doing this cool, weird music, right? So, yeah. So basically, the band there were no Germans in the band. By this point, I'd moved back to San Francisco. So we just started in San Francisco with various friends, and things, and kind of dancing around with the chronology. But needless to say, Mushroom starts years ago, and we developed a pretty good German following. And we also did pretty well in the United States. We have this album called Analog Hi-Fi Surprise that's now available on Bandcamp with a ton of bonus tracks. That album sold like, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 in the United States, which, for me is like a gold record, and got some good press. That was in 1999.
Wow.
And so over time, there's been maybe 10 sort of what I call core Mushroom members, and then have been about 20 sort of floating members or occasional members, but there's like 15 albums out there. Many of them are out of print, of course, but I'm slowly building the Bandcamp page. In fact, if anyone is listening, if you Google Mushroom Bandcamp Songs of Dissent, you'll quickly find our Bandcamp page.
Yeah, and please go do that for anybody that's listening. Pat, I'm glad you are talking about the membership of Mushroom. There are some connections to the Paisley Underground besides yourself as a producer that's put out multiple records that are, if not directly or indirectly related to Paisley Underground. You, in your membership, you've also had Alec Palau, who's played with Rain Parade, Juan Gomez, who also used to play with Dennis Duck and Human Hands, and
Clay Allison, and early versions of Opal. Yep.
Yeah, so there's definitely some connections. And I see you kind of as this conductor of Mushroom. When I've seen you live, you're not yelling out, barking out orders or very specific, but you're definitely guiding the band in multiple ways, pointing to people to start songs. Definitely with a beat. There's times when you'll jump in and you're playing the beat that's ties into what everybody's doing, but then there's also times when you go a completely different direction and start driving the band in other directions. So as this conductor type person of Mushroom, at least the way that I see it, with this membership, rotating membership and core membership, how are these people chosen? Are they just friends of yours or people you appreciate musically, or how do you bring in all these people?
I think that for people like, obviously DJ Bonebreak's not an active member, but for somebody like DJ, certainly for David Emmerich, these guys play in bands that are very popular, right? X or Counting Crows, and they have probably a pretty strict set list, right? I mean, the idea that someone of their caliber can come in and just do whatever the hell they want and also not have to rehearse, right? So it's a way, I think, of some musicians blowing off a little steam, right? Maybe for some of the musicians that are lesser known, that don't have a famous band, like the bass player Ned Doherty, for example, he just loves the whole sort of jazz rock psychedelic improv thing regardless, and it's kind of cool, Chris, what is it? Greg Leischer from Camper, he just sat in with us and he said, man, I've been wanting to do this for years. Right? I'm thinking, really? like we've kind of, again, I don't want to overstate like we're some popular band, but I think amongst people who know, they kind of dig it. But basically the people are friends of mine that I know, have, they share the aesthetic. In other words, they have a handful of King Crimson or Miles Davis records in their collection, and they kind of know, there's been very few people that didn't cut it, so to speak. And by that, I don't mean their musicianship's not good enough. I mean, there's been only a few people that kind of did, and they're like, I could tell that it just wasn't for them,
Right.
Almost everyone who's played with us is generally really liked it. And most people are like, can I come back? Or so it's been cool. The other cool thing about it, you don't have the band drama. In other words, there's no band meetings. There's no band arguments.
Yes.
It's very, whatever it is. And the other thing that's a little different between our LA gigs and our Bay Area gigs, when we play in LA, I always put the drums right in front. So in other words, I'm like where the lead singer, if there was a singer, would have been, and everyone else is behind me, which really gives it the feel of me as the band leader. When we play in San Francisco, I'm like most drummers, I'm in the back, but I'm still sort of consciously or subconsciously sort of calling, the shots. When we're in the studio, the way that I conduct is I add and subtract members. In other words, I'll go, okay, we're going to play for an hour with just these 4 guys. Then we're going to play for an hour with these 7 guys. Then we're going to play for an hour with these 5 guys, right? And adding and subtract, I don't tend to do that live because it would be chaotic, but in the studio, I sort of add and subtract guys, and that creates a whole mood in and of itself,
Well, you had mentioned the influence of Miles Davis, and I wanted to bring up at this point that although Songs of Dissent is more psychedelic jazz rock, you've had in the past more towards the jazz side of it. And Eddie Gale, who's a legend in and of himself as a trumpeter, who played with the Sun Ra orchestra, right? Orchestra.
Yeah.
You even worked with like these amazing jazz musicians as well as these rock.
Yeah, there's been times when Mushroom had horns, sometimes one, sometimes two or three. So for example, Eddie Gale just said was played with Sunrise. Eddie Gale did 2 albums on Blue Note in the 1960s, one called Ghetto Music and one called Black Rhythm Happening. And for people that are into funky jazz, he's like a legend. He unfortunately passed away recently. For most of Mushroom's existence, we had Ralph Carney on saxophone and clarinet. Ralph was in Tom Waits' band for 15 years. He toured with the B-52s. He's even on some Galaxy 500 records. Like, Ralph was a maverick horn player. And the only reason he's not with us is he fell down the stairs, broke his neck, and died, sadly. And then another notable player we had a trumpet player named John Birdsong, who in the 90s toured a lot with Beck. And he also toured with this English singer-songwriter, Beth Orton. So yeah, we have done the horn thing. We did a gig in September with a woman named Beth Custer on bass clarinet, who's very well known in San Francisco. So yeah, there has been times where it's been more of a horn thing. Obviously with Imre Gluck and Victor, it becomes very much a guitar thing. And then sometimes, we've got guys with, we sometimes have 2 keyboard players. One guy maybe playing a funky Fender Rhodes, another guy doing sort of, so, it's I think it's never boring for us as the players, and it's hopefully never too boring for the listeners.
No, never. I'm glad you mentioned Ralph, because Songs of Dissent you've dedicated to Ralph. So
yeah. For people here in LA, Ralph was an occasional part of the Wild Honey crew. I know he did the Big Star Third, and I think he did something else. But yeah, a lot of people knew Ralph. Really great guy.
And Pat, for this album, sorry, just going back to the album for a minute. The intent, was it 22 years? Let's go back to the makeout room, or
Well, what happened was our first gig, was at the makeout room, as I mentioned on the CD itself. Over the next 10 plus years, we played the makeout room a lot, but we did other plays. We played the Great American Music Hall. We opened for these krautrock legends, Faust. We played outside of the Shoreline Amphitheater on a mini stage as openers for the band Yes. So we played a lot of venues, but about 10 or 15 years ago, I got tired of, and anyone who's been in a band knows what this is like, especially if you're not a famous band, right? You call up a club, can I please play? And then of course they don't return your call. Can I please, right? So I just, as I started to get older, I was like, oh my God, this is so painful. Anyway, I have this sort of arrangement with the makeout room. And by arrangement, I just mean the owner, Marty, is a friend, where I just say, Marty, can we play the makeout room? And he goes, sure, right? There's none of this dance that you do. The other thing is people in local bands know to be like, well, if I give you a Tuesday night, how many people can you guarantee me? If I give you the Friday, the makeout room doesn't really work like that, because their main income later in the evening, they're like a discotheque for young hipsters. So the music, Marty only books what he likes, and he's never been concerned with, well, you had 40 paying customers, but I was really hoping you'd have 50, right? Like, we've never had that conversation. And so basically, it wasn't so much about a homecoming. It was just like, this is our regular gig. And I kind of noted the fact that, hey, it's been 22 years,
So was the intention to make an album when you guys performed?
No. We tend to record every show, usually an amateur recording, just somebody in the audience, a buddy, or this particular show, because there were 2 Monks of Doom, there's a Monks of Doom nerd, and I mean that lovingly, who tapes everything that those guys do. And then Gary Habish, who I've known for years, who works with us on and off as a mastering engineer. He came down and recorded, professionally, but there wasn't like, we're making a live album. What happened was, and we're going to nerd out here for a minute. The Monks of Doom guy, he's credited on the album. I just can't think of his name. He's so into it that he records on 2 separate hard drives with 2 different sets of stereo mics. So in other words, he's double recording it. You follow what I mean?
Wow.
Okay. And then of course my buddy Gary's recording it, right? So for those of you that have heard the album or will hear the album, there's a real sort of 360-degree sound. It's almost like it's stereo, but it feels like it's 5.1. And that's because you've got 3 recordings that have been blended together on Pro Tools.
Wow.
So in other words, you've got microphones over here and you've got them over there, so you're getting this room sound. And it's particularly interesting because there's 3 drummers and you're hearing the hand percussion, you're hearing the drummer, I don't know. I think it's a really cool recording. And then luckily, we just happen to have done a really good show. It could have been like, oh, it sounds great, but the music is boring. It was a really great combination of a great night for us and then this very special, recording technique. Nice.
So Tom Scharf, I believe, is the name of the person that did this.
Yes. I think he also records everything to do with Camper as well. I think he's just Camper Monks guy. Really nice guy.
So Pat, specifically talking about Songs of Dissent and generally talking about Mushroom, I'm fascinated about the titles that you come up for the song pieces. So in a live setting, it doesn't matter. You're not introducing the next song is such and such. I mean, as we talked about earlier, most of these songs are created on the spot with the vibe from I imagine the audience and definitely the musicians in the band. But you'll most likely never hear a song twice. Although on this album, Kraut Mask Replica was a title that also from Yesterday I Saw You Kissing Tiny Flowers, a previous release that came out in 2007.
Right.
So when do the titles come up? Is it when you're releasing something? And how do you come up with these crazy titles?
Basically, after everything is done, right? So in other words, let's say we're in the studio where we might record 30 bits and use 10, right? I don't title those 30 bits.
Got it.
Like what I might do is more right, like slow blues song, fast and funky with a sitar, like just to remember how the song is, right?
Descriptive.
Descriptive, right? But then when the album is sort of put together, like these are the 10 songs, I just sort of, well, I'm a big fan of beat poetry, and I'm a big fan of Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs and these guys, and they were very big on improvisation with words, right?
Yes.
So I just sort of throw it out there, and they're meant with most of them, not all of them are meant with humor. This particular album, I'm not sure has a ton of funny ones, but there's other albums that are like, you probably laugh your ass off when you read it.
Right. I'll go ahead and read the titles for this. So we have, and I'll mention that the shortest piece is about 7.5 minutes. The longest piece, close to a half an hour. So the introduction piece you've titled Founding Father. Piece number 2, 2 men say they're Jesus. One of them must be wrong. I love that. You've got to get in to get out. Everything's gone green. The March of the Wooden Soldiers. Free range. And then the last piece, which is about 30 minutes, just shy of 30 minutes. Kraut Mask Replica, which we mentioned. Steal This Riff, which is great. And then Redux. So right. So 2 men say they're Jesus. One of them must be wrong, Pat.
Yes. Where does that come from?
No. I don't know where that's your title. But.
Well, okay. This will probably cause people to gag because a lot of people don't like this band. That's actually a song lyric, a piece of a lyric from a Dire Straits song of all places. Right. Now, I personally kind of like the Dire Straits, especially the early stuff. Other people go, oh my God, the Dire Straits, I think I'm going to puke. But it has nothing to do musically with the Dire Straits. But when I heard Mark Knopfler sing that lyric like 35 years ago, I said, that's a great lyric, right? March of the Wooden Soldiers, that's a lyric from Lou Reed's Sweet Jane. Kraut Mask Replica, of course, is a pun, right? There's Trout Mask Replica.
Captain Beefheart.
Yeah, people love krautrock, so that's playful. Everything's Gone Green is one of the rare cases of me letting someone else title it. That's actually Immergluck came up with that.
Wow.
Now, one title that I wanted to use that didn't get used, it'll get used in the future maybe, it was called Jorma Kaukonen versus Victor Krummenacher.
Oh.
Jorma Kaukonen, of course, is the guitar player of the Jefferson Airplane, right? But sometimes the titles like one album had "What Do You Say to a Man Who's Just Killed a Lion with His Bare Hands and is now making love to your wife."
Right.
Right. So sometimes the titles are goofy. Another one is something against DJ. What the hell is that title? Oh well, here's another one. Americans Own the Moon. They bought it from the Germans who won it in a poker game during World War II. Okay. Now, where the hell did I come up with that, right? When we were touring Germany, that was written on the bathroom wall in a club we played.
Wow.
So I just sort of and I don't really write these down. It's not like I have a book where I go, okay, I'll use this for a title 2 years from now. I just sort of remember these lyrics or these bathroom wall things,
Nice.
And that's where the titles, come from. Sometimes they might be a movie I just watched, so yeah, I don't know, it's fun. It's one of the funnest parts of the process, really, for me,
Words floating around in the head of Pat Thomas.
Yeah, exactly.
Improv all around, from title to song to album.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Pat, we didn't want to take up too much of your time, but for our listeners, Songs of Dissent, mine's got Victor's little scribble here. But
Okay.
I gotta hunt you down, Pat, and
stalk
you and see if I can get you to sign.
I just again wanted to promote, if you Google Bandcamp, and so you just put in the words Bandcamp Mushroom Songs of Dissent, or obviously if you go to Bandcamp, I think there's a few different mushrooms. So if you go to Bandcamp, just put in Mushroom and Songs of Dissent, it'll come up. This is available on CD and a download. And then what I consider perhaps one of our best albums, Analog Hi-Fi Surprise, is a deluxe edition. And I sell this shit super cheap. Downloads are $7. Physical CDs are only 10. So I'm kind of just getting it out there. Well,
yep.
thank you guys.
So again, according to your hype sticker, self-described psychedelic jazz rock improv. So you're probably not going to hear like specific songs. You're going to hear songs developing. For me, Pat, this is definitely in my top 10 releases of this year, probably top 5.
Really?
I have a handful of Mushroom releases, not all 15 of them or whatever there are, but this one I think is fantastic. It's really good. There's some great pieces.
Dude, I'm particularly flattered because I know you're more of a pop song guy, right? You're not
Yep.
sitting around cranking like 7 hours of Soft Machine over and over again.
Exactly.
In fact, the best compliment I got on this record is I was listening to it, and a friend of mine who has seen Mushroom many times and doesn't like Mushroom at all was in the other room. And after the thing was done, they came in and said, "What was that?" I go, "That's Mushroom." They said, "Dude, I've always hated Mushroom, but that's great. It sounds like I thought it was like a well-known like world beat band, right?" So that was a very cool compliment for somebody not knowing what it was already predetermined to dislike Mushroom, and then said, "Oh my God, this is great," So there you go.
There you go. Perfect. And before we let you go, I just wanted to mention real briefly, we've talked about it a little bit, but the True West box set is out now, the 3 CD box set, and Pat's got some liner notes in here, was part of putting this together. We'll hopefully be able to talk a little bit more about this now that it's out. And then also I wanted to mention real quick, Pat, before saying goodbye, the Out of the Gray 3 CD box set is coming out. The title, What Can I Say? No Regrets, from Dream Syndicate. You're a big part of that. So you're always doing something, Pat.
Yeah, we'll do I believe we're going to do a True West box set podcast, but we'll definitely, after the Dream Center thing comes out in January, we can do one on that.
Perfect.
Well, cool, guys.
All right, Pat. Well, thank you for taking some time.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you for giving us the homework too.
All right, cool. All right, guys.
All right, Pat. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Bye.
So, Soraya, Songs of Dissent, live from the Makeout Room, August 9th, 2019. This is a really fun listen. For me, I've listened to this in a couple different settings, including here in my room.
Right.
But I really like this in my car driving along the coast. So a lot of these songs, because they're put together improvisationally, they kind of all build. And I was mentioning previously that Pat kind of directs these musicians a little bit more, at least when I've seen him live, where he'll point to somebody and say, all right, you start the song, or, start to develop. And a lot of times it'll start with maybe something drony or some kind of rhythm or riff. And then everybody will start to come in. So these songs slowly start to build into these different things. Let me turn that off. So these songs slowly start to build into something bigger and greater, and they go in all these different places. Yeah. So anyways, this is a really fun listen. No lyrics whatsoever. So the only voices that you will hear is Pat's little introduction piece. And in between songs, a little bit of audience banter,
right?
Unintentional audience banter, but it's all instrumentation and some great musicians that played on this. I really enjoy this record quite a bit. So I'm glad that we were able to feature Pat Thomas. We've talked to him multiple times as a producer, author, but I'm glad to be able to push even just a little bit the music that he's been a part of. And this Mushroom project is fantastic. Yeah. So if they do play live again, I highly recommend them. It's in that live environment where you get to see like all the magic happening as it's happening. So these aren't songs that are well rehearsed, where they've gone into rehearsal studios and played it every day for 3 months before going on their world tour. It's these world-class musicians coming together and just vibing off of each other and creating this music on the spot. It's fantastic.
And I think that's what's really enjoyable about Mushroom's music, is you really get to enjoy the artistry behind it. These are fantastic musicians and they're coming together, and the whole idea of improv is going one way, see it where it goes, and just kind of working off of those tangents. Great music, excellent musicians, and I'm really glad that Pat has given us this release. And as he mentioned on the Bandcamp page for Mushroom, and he did say there's maybe 1 or 2 mushrooms out there. So Mushroom, if you put Mushroom Songs of Dissent, you'll go to his. And he said he's building that page. So I know Jeff recommends, I recommend listening to and getting these releases. They're really good.
Yes, absolutely. And he's selling them dirt cheap. So if you are so inclined to purchase anything and want to throw him a couple extra dollars, I know Pat can certainly use it.
First Friday coming up.
Yes.
If you'd like to make sure that the artist, it feels like I'm saying the artist formerly known as Prince, the artist that known as Mushroom, but to support the artist, wait for a First Friday, let them enjoy all of it. Please do.
Yes, absolutely. And as Pat teased, hopefully we'll be having a discussion with him and perhaps Ronnie and maybe another guest as we do a bigger review of True West's new CD box set. So Kaleidoscopes of the Shadows, the story so far. We did talk to Gavin and Russ a bit before this came out, but now this is out. We'd like to see if we can't bring these guys back. So you might see that in the future. Yours is signed, mine is not. But anyway, so hopefully that'll be coming up. We'll probably be very inconsistent, if nothing, for the rest of the year with the holidays coming up. We don't know. So if you don't see us, it's because we're enjoying our holidays with our families. So We'll see what we can do.
Hey, two men say they're Jesus. Only one of them's right. one of them must be wrong.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Jeff, mi gente, agruviar.
Grew on Paisley people.